Feast TV is brought to you with support from Missouri Wines, Whole Foods Market, and Dining Out for Life. It is February, and what better month in which to celebrate the black walnut and some whiskey. And this month, I'm going to be demonstrating a recipe by one of our columnists, Shannon Weber. She was tasked with developing a bunch of different recipes for the black walnut, which has a very distinct flavor. Typically, recipes using black walnuts are sweet and use a lot of chocolate, but what I'm going to show you today is her recipe for a wild rice salad that includes candied black walnuts and a black walnut dressing. At the end of the show, I'm going to be pairing the rice salad with a couple of wines from Noble Ice, and then I'm going to pair chocolate-covered black walnuts with some Missouri ports, which are delicious. But before we get into the recipe, let's head to Stockton, Missouri and meet the Hammond family.
We're standing on the shoulders of a lot of really great people, insightful people, dedicated people. In 1946, my grandfather had a grocery store in Stockton. He had an opportunity then to buy black walnuts for a company in Virginia. And he did that. He bought local black walnuts and shipped them over there. Then he looked around and realized, hey, there are a lot of black walnut trees around here. Maybe there's an opportunity for me and for our local businesses here. So he bought a black walnut nut cracker in Tennessee, brought it here, and he bought 100,000 pounds that first year and cracked all those nuts. That's a lot of nuts for a little grocery store owner.
Yep.
He cracked those, he sold those under the Missouri Dandy brand name, and today, now we can crack and process over 100,000 pounds in one day. This year we actually were able to buy 31 million pounds of nuts, and almost all of those are wild nuts, hand harvested by people who go out in yards and pastures during the fall of the year and pick up the wild nuts just laying there. And they sell them to a local buying station. We have over 200 of those set up in 10 states. Most of those are in Missouri. 65% of the crop most every year comes from right here in Missouri. First of all, we take the nuts from here and we cut the sacks. The nuts that go through a tumbling process to clean whatever hull debris may be left on the nuts. They go from the dryer into the cracking room. Once the nuts cracked, then the combination of nut meats and shell goes through a electronic sorting machine that uses infrared light. And that infrared light reflects at a different frequency off of shells than it does off of nut meats. There's a sensor that picks up that different frequency, sends out a burst of air, and kicks out the shell.
It's amazing.
So the nut meats go through a series of those before then they are sized and then ready for the inspection tables where they're finally reviewed one more time.
Now let's talk about that flavor. This is something that is extremely unique. If you could tell somebody what this nut tastes like who's never had it before, how would you describe it?
I use phrases like bold, robust, rich, and distinctive.
Yeah.
It's a flavor like no other. It's an ingredient nut that helps to accent the flavors around it. Kind of like a fine wine and a very bold, very earthy flavor.
Well, I love the flavor of the black walnut because I put it in my banana bread muffins and I put it in my brownies, and I even have like caramelized black walnuts and stuff, and I put it on ice cream just on top. And I just love it. I grew up with English walnuts, but since I've been working here, I learned to love them. It's a gift of God that is just continuing to find new uses. The shell is a good hard industrial product. We have a lot of it because most of the nut is shell. But we grind the shell and into several different sizes
And those are used in sandblasting, blast cleaning, buildings and equipment.
Didn't you say the Statue of Liberty?
Statue of Liberty was cleaned with black walnut shell many years ago.
amazing.
Yeah, battleships were refurbished with them.
Now, you also just recently won an award.
Well, we did. We did. That's pretty exciting. David, my son, has done a great job helping develop a new product called black walnut oil. This is something we had in mind years ago. We didn't know how to do it. We finally found a company that could press the black walnut and extract the oil. And now they bottled it and marketed it. And now it's been announced that we won a Good Food Award.
It's amazing.
Recent competition with 16 other oils from all over the country, and we're really excited about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we've been blessed with some wonderful opportunities. We're not real big, but we're big enough that we get a chance to do some things that can lead to some really exciting things down the road.
Black walnuts really have a distinct flavor, and it's something unlike any other nut that you've tried. Most nuts are very mild, and the black walnut has a wild kind of tannic flavor, and it is an acquired taste. People either generally like it or they don't. I personally do love it, so I'm excited to introduce you to how to use these in a savory application. So what I'm going to do in this first segment of the recipe is sugar the walnuts. First thing I'm going to do is boil 1 tablespoon of water with 3 tablespoons of just plain old sugar, and once that dissolves, I'm gonna mix in my nuts. Okay, so we've got our sugared nuts. This is just plain old parchment paper. Don't use waxed paper because then the wax will melt. And we're just taking the nuts and just spreading it in an even layer. And I'm gonna pop this into a 300-degree oven for 20 minutes, stirring about every 5 minutes so that it doesn't burn. So just kind of keep your eye on it. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this up, and in this next segment, I'm going to introduce you to a local distiller who is part of the huge movement toward not only craft distilling, but also whiskey creation here in the St. Louis area.
Everybody comes in and they're a little unsure about the name. We put a lot of thought into this, and we capitalized the last L to emphasize STL. The 630, it stands for the date we were founded, June 30th. It also stands for the serial number of our still, which was handmade right here in Missouri. It's a unique, one-of-a-kind pot still. Most importantly, it stands for our inspiration, the height and width of the gateway arch, 630 feet high and wide. I had a very logical progression through life. From my college at Wabash College, where I was an English major, and then became a river rafting guide down in North Carolina. From that, I went to Chicago and became a futures trader. And I loved it, but it wasn't a life I could ever envision. Most of all, I wanted something where I was in control. I wanted to be responsible for my success or failure. So I wanted to start something that ideally future generations of my family can run. So a typical day for me really varies because I'm employee 1 of 1, so I do everything around here. It's actually much more similar to brewing beer than people think. So this is where the whiskey making process starts. This is our mash tun. It's 500 gallons, double jacketed, and I heat it to 150 degrees, and I hold it there for about 90 minutes. And so once we've cooled it to 70 degrees, I transfer it over into these fermenters. When I went about choosing which whiskeys I wanted to start with, I like the bold, flavorful ones. And I don't mean that burn your tongue, I mean that have complex flavors and notes in your mouthfeel. I wanted something that was naturally delicious, and rye fit that bill for me. So much more front forward and flavorful and complex than corn or wheat, which are mellower and a little sweeter. And so I knew I wanted to start with an unaged spirit, so I'd have something to come to market with directly. And when I made our Big Jake, our White Dog whiskey, White Dog is a common term for white whiskey, unaged, and I have a big white dog named Jake, and that's where the name came from. Once I have it in these tanks, it's 70 degrees, ideal temperature for yeast, and we pitch our yeast in. 4 or 5 days later, they've created beer. Not the same beer you see all around town that's delicious, it's distiller's beer. It's a little bit more sour, it's acidic. It's about 7 or 8% alcohol though, and that's what we're really shooting for. We put this 8% alcohol in here, about 100 gallons of it. A still is basically a boiling device. So what I do is I raise the heat slowly to allow those different alcohols to boil off at their respective temperatures. I want to focus on rums. I've got a sorghum whiskey that's in little barrels out in the front that should be ready in the next few months that I'm very excited about. Bourbon is a pet of mine that I love it, and so I really want to make a good bourbon. And a lot of people think you can only make it in Kentucky. It's not true. It has to be in the United States. But I have to separate them like this, and I collect them in the mason jars as opposed to one big container because I need to go through and separate out the good from the bad. The heads are the first ones to boil off, but these are the noxious chemicals. It's like acetaldehyde, acetone, it's nail polish remover stuff. I had a girl on a tour earlier this year who didn't believe me, and so stupidly I let her stick her finger in there. And she pulled it back out, and there was a nice clean line right there that had taken her nail polish off. And she started freaking out like, oh my God, I just did my nails this morning. And I said, oh my God, I told you what was gonna happen. Our rye whiskeys are a little bit smoother than people expect, especially for their young age. It's a complex flavor that has a lot of like sweet caramel notes. It's got that rye kind of spice to it, but it's not overwhelming. One of the most commonly remarked things that people say is, oh wow, that's kind of smooth. And that especially comes from a lot of non-self-identified whiskey drinkers. Like people, women, girlfriends that come in to do the tastings, wives, are surprised, like, oh, I could drink that. And when I hear that, I know that I've made a really good product because people that don't normally drink it would be willing to. Yeah, it's phenomenal. I get to make something that people really enjoy. And it's a concrete product in my hand that I can stand behind and say, I made this.
I think it's so fun to see the creative spirit behind a lot of these new distilleries. Still 630 is one of a handful of places where you can get these craft-made spirits, and I'm excited to see what he does with the company. It's less than a year old, and they're already making some really great stuff. I want to show you the black walnuts that have been sugared. They have cooled, and you can see that they're just covered with this great kind of sparkly sugar syrup. Next, I'm going to show you how to make the black walnut dressing. The first thing that I need to do is puree a half a cup of black walnuts into a paste in my food processor. So keep going until it looks kind of like peanut butter. If all it is just kind of chopped finely, you're not in the right spot. What you want to have happen is for the nuts to break down to the point where they really start to release all of those oils and become this paste-like texture, just like peanut butter. Okay, so to this black walnut paste, just going to zest this orange. Okay, and then just about 1/3 of a cup of the juice of your orange. So I'm just gonna stir this to incorporate the orange juice and the zest and that paste. You can see this is just getting super creamy. 2 tablespoons of vinegar. All right, so I'm gonna whisk in a half a cup of this olive oil, and this will create an emulsion. There's already a lot of fat in this dressing, but this will help to just kind of liquefy this further and give it a looser texture. So I've finished with my dressing, and before I move on to the next step in the recipe, which involves making the wild rice, let's head over to the Planter's House, a brand new restaurant and bar headed up by the Kilgores, who are well known for their amazing cocktails.
I really wanted to do something that would reflect part of St. Louis history, and in doing research, I came across the Tom Bullock book and thought that was really cool, and I really wanted to bring to light that St. Louis does have cocktail history, and not only does it have cocktail history, it has early cocktail history.
Ted Kilgore came to me at Brasserie with an idea for his own bar. Old school hotel bar with intimate cocktail lounge involved in it. Obviously the concept was there, you just had to fit it in a neighborhood. I think this was the second or third spot we looked at, and we loved it. I mean, obviously it fits exactly the concept we were looking for. The outside had that wonderful, great big windows, the pillars, the detail that you look for, that gives you that kind of old feeling. And then when you walk in, the great tall ceilings, the brickwork, the archways, just was all exactly what we wanted.
Our concept is based on the Planters Hotel and Tom Bullock from the St. Louis Country Club. We're really hearkening the history of hospitality and cocktails in St. Louis, so the space itself, we wanted to have a feel of history. These are the original light fixtures from 1929 from the police station on Clark and Tucker. They were the best find, and we're so happy to have them here. There was a company called Brunswick, turn of the century, and they made these gorgeous, beautiful bars. They were just stunning, and that was really what inspired the design of this bar. What I wanted was for the bar to curve into the ceiling so that we still had that feeling of fluidity. It matches the arches of the windows, it matches the arch of the St. Louis arch. It's a softer, more comforting, welcoming feel to the space.
One of the most famous celebrity bartenders is Jerry Thomas, who wrote the first cocktail book. His second printing, we actually listed him as principal bartender of Planters House in St. Louis, Missouri. At the time, it was one of the most famous places in the country. So we really wanted to encapsulate that feeling of St. Louis-centric hospitality and grandness. So our menus definitely inspired by the pre-Prohibition style and the menus of those times, food and drink.
We found Bradley. We gave him a challenge. We gave him menus from the actual Planters House and from the time period around that. Just take that and sort of contemporize it, bring it up to date a little bit. Bradley nailed it right from the get-go, like the goat spätzle and just bringing little things, the pickled vegetables that he's doing with different alcohols. He's bringing the bar into the kitchen, and he kind of just got it.
And our other secondary bar, which is more cocktail-centric, it has a larger cocktail list and a much smaller food menu. We've called it the Bullock Room. A key element of the space, I feel, is the flocked wallpaper. It kind of a character all in its own in the Bullock Room, and I really think that it makes the space special, warm, intimate, and I've lost count of how many people have walked into that space and rubbed the walls.
And this is what we're going to do, it's called a swizzle. We're going to use our fancy swizzle stick. Swizzling was an old school way of mixing a drink without shaking. Really big on, obviously, here is consistency, so all of our bar staff is very consistent with how we mix everything. The cocktail always has to look as if it's ready to have its picture taken. I tell my staff that all the time.
I'm a huge believer in atmosphere breeds success. Consistency, and atmosphere. People don't want to be somewhere that doesn't have a good vibe to it, that doesn't feel comfortable, which I think we definitely got with the design. And we have an amazing staff, I have to say first, that really gives us that kind of atmosphere and that vibe. I just really want everybody to leave here thinking I can't wait to come back.
I absolutely nerd out all the time on the history of food, and I just love what they're doing over at the Planters House. I think it's a ton of fun. This wild rice is finished. Now, wild rice is much tougher than a standard white rice. When you look at it, it almost looks like needles, like pine needles kind of, and the aroma is nutty. It's completely different than regular rice. You'll really love it, so seek it out in your grocery store. I'm just gonna go ahead and put all of my rice into this gorgeous bowl. Okay, so to the warm rice, I'm going to supreme 4 of these clementines. Now when you see supreme in a recipe, do not be intimidated. It's very easy. Essentially, we're going to segment these. So I'm gonna show you how to do it. You just cut the top and the bottom off of your clementine. And then you just take your knife and cut the skin off, being as careful as possible not to get the flesh of the fruit. Then you just pick it up, and following the segments. You just cut that, see? You just cut it straight through. By supreming your clementine or your orange or your lemon or whatever it is you're using, rather than peeling and chopping it up, then you don't have any of the membranes, and all you get is that wonderful juicy flesh. Okay, now I'm just going to gently toss all these ingredients together. And to me, if you're gonna have a salad in the wintertime, something like this, I mean, it's all the textures and flavors and colors, this is something that will definitely brighten up a dull late winter day in February. Okay, so all of our gorgeous ingredients have been combined, and now we're adding in the black walnut dressing that we made a little bit ago, and it is thick and rich. So what I would suggest is that you just kind of drizzle a little bit on and then stir to incorporate, but don't glop it all on because you'll just find that it's tough to stir. Now I'm just going to top the salad with those sugared nuts that we made at the very beginning of the show. And the very last crowning touch on the salad is going to be just a little bit of goat cheese. Shannon Weber does an amazing job developing recipes for feasts. She's one of our best contributors. So my salad is complete. And let's go meet the legendary Bommarito family and see what some of the changes are that they've made to Tony's restaurant.
I think at the beginning, when we were learning about food, I don't think we were great, but we took care of the people. I know when I took over, the way they were doing it, they were cooking the pasta ahead, and it didn't taste as good as we had at home. So let's cook this pasta fresh every time. You know, that came early on. I don't know, I had enough common sense to go around to other spaghetti houses and see how they did it. And some places, of course, were more established or more professional, but the food wasn't so hot. So I said, heck, I can do this better than them. We had a wholesale butcher next door to us, and I got to know these two tough Irish guys. They took a liking to me, and I asked them if I could cut meat on Saturday when they did retail business, and for nothing, so I could see how they do it. And at first they had me grinding hamburger, and I told them I don't want to do that. I want to learn how to cut the steaks and feel the steaks, what's good. Then I found out we were using choice, and after a few years I said, well, what's the best one? Let's get the best one. They had those dry aged hanging prime beef. I said, let's buy the best one. We could do it better than anybody. So we did it. We didn't make much money. We didn't make any money at the beginning. We were more concerned about the product than the bottom line. Vince, he's the sharpest young guy around. He's cool, and he knows food. We share things. He experiments. And sometimes he runs it by me, and sometimes he don't, and it's okay. I have confidence in him now.
It's easier to keep things the way they are. Probably getting over the whole idea of what are people going to think if we do this, what are they going to think if we do that. Just got to move forward, be a little confident, and say that this is going to work, people will like this, and hopefully it'll happen. Well, we just remodeled about 10 years ago, so that the main room is not going to have too many changes. We're going to have new floor coverings in that room and in the entire restaurant. As you come in the restaurant, you will notice the flooring right away, because in the foyer there's going to be hard service. It's going to be a travertine, and then as you walk in and down the hallway, we're warming it up with paneling and new carpet. The biggest change, I think, will be the living room, what we call the living room area, and it's just going to look very different, more contemporary, a little brighter, and it's kind of exciting. New menu items. We are doing a herb roasted lobster on the half shell with a pancetta risotto. We're doing the fish with the parsnips and the butternut squash. And we're doing fettuccine with duck confit with spinach and wild mushrooms. Quality of the food will always be the best. We buy the best you can get anywhere, no matter what. That'll never change. Food quality will never change. If you want to come in blue jeans instead of a coat and a tie, that can change, but the food will never change. Today we're making fettuccine with the confit of duck.
Now this is one of the new menu items, right?
It is. So we confit the ducks ourselves, the duck legs and thighs, We pull them off the bone. All right, homemade fettuccine, regular egg noodles.
Now, obviously, Tony's is a pasta house at its very, very first.
Exactly, the first incarnation.
Yeah.
Well, actually second. First it was more of a diner than anything, and then it kind of turned into a spaghetti house before it turned into a steakhouse.
It's amazing.
I know. So we're only going to cook this pasta halfway.
Okay.
The rest of the way in the sauce. This was the duck brown sauce. It's a reduction of the bones and veal stock.
Beautiful.
Tomatoes. So we're going to stir in a little butter.
Nice.
We're going to add a little bit of salt. And these are some sauteed wild mushrooms.
Beautiful. With the new menu items, what is it that, how are you balancing the traditional things that are staying on the menu with these new?
It's a balancing act. And a lot of times with the new things on the menu, I just might run for a special for a couple months until I get a little feedback. Then if it goes well, then I'll put them on and try to inch something else off. So I put in about twice as much of the brown sauce that I needed. So I'll cook it down and let the noodles absorb it, and then it'll get stronger and stronger as it goes down.
Nice.
And we're just gonna add a little bit of red vinegar just to give it a little zip. So it's done. You notice the sauce got thickened a little bit by the butter and the starch in the noodles.
That's absolutely beautiful.
I don't know if I ever lacked confidence that, you know, if we'd have a night that didn't go right or a lunch, if we didn't get it right, it was like playing a game, or I was an amateur fighter and you couldn't wait to play the game over, you know. We think we can satisfy anybody. I don't think I ever met a person I didn't think I could satisfy. I truly go open this restaurant every night thinking we could satisfy every customer. What time is it, guys?
Showtime!
So that duck confit pasta that Vincent made is absolutely incredible. You need to get over to Tony's ASAP to give it a try. There's a reason why places stay in business for 60 years. It's because the food is fantastic. Now we've come to the wine portion of the evening. And with the salad, I am going to choose between one of these two Noble Ice wines. This is an acidic white blend that's made by the Augusta area vineyard. And then this is a very light red, and one of those would make a great pair with the savory application for the black walnuts. But I also mentioned that black walnuts are very often paired with chocolate, and so I wanted to point out to you some of the great Missouri ports that are made locally. This happens to be by Mount Pleasant Winery. It is a wonderful sweet port, and the intensity of the flavor goes perfectly with the intensity of the chocolate and also the walnuts. So these two ports are very different. This is similar to a ruby port, and then this is a tawny port, and it's much lighter and nuttier, and you can tell immediately the difference just in the colors. So whether sweet or savory, black walnuts are a wonderful thing to try during the cold months of February. Cheers, and I'll see you next month.